Our presenter today is Roger Aegerter, the Executive Director of the Greene County Historical Society, who's been our Executive Director for 10 years. And I frankly am not sure how we'd get along without him. I think that the decision by our board 10 years ago to hire him was one of the most important things we've done. He's done a wonderful job. He is a native of Rockwell City. He went to Iowa State University, was a K-12 art teacher, wound up as a principal in the Southern Cal schools, and then came to Peyton-Jourdan and was a superintendent of schools there, and retired from education in 2005, and then came to, was already living here in Jefferson. I think he's lived here. He would be doing arrangements and keeping the museum running and rounding up volunteers and all that, but he's also stepped out to do programming himself, like he's done enactments of Nathaniel Greene, the namesake of this county, Revolutionary War history, and costume all up and do that. He's driven the Don Coon's wonderful old pickup in the Bell Tower Parade. He did a program on his drive across the historic Lincoln Highway all the way coast to coast in 2 different trips. And then he painted the historic Lincoln Highway on this block of East Lincoln Way right here about 2 years ago. So he's lived a lot of history while he's been our executive director. His program today is on Jefferson, 150 years young. He's put this together as we celebrate the community's sesquicentennial. As always, we're videotaping here today. Carson Roberts, our Director of Digital History, is back here, has the camera rolling, so this will be posted soon on the Greene County Historical Society's YouTube channel. But for now, join me in welcoming Roger Aegerter.
Okay, so I really don't know how long this is going to be. I didn't go through it because it was way too long. And as most things, these are what I think, no, not what I think, what happened that I think were important. So there might be some history things in here that you think, oh, that doesn't apply, or some that you think, why did he say that? And there are some things that happen around the county that I thought were important that influenced the actual Jefferson history. So when you hear something about something out at Squirrel Hollow or something, just bear with me that in some way I thought that was important to the Jefferson 150. Okay? So here we go. Jefferson, 150 years old. I'm going to sit down because it's going to be a long afternoon. Bear with me. There's food and drink back there. The bathroom's over there. If you have to leave, just wave as you go out the door. Okay, so 150 years. Oh, I marked my little button with a pink piece of tape here, so I know what to hit. Here we go. So, welcome to the program today is going to cover Jefferson history, Iowa history, the world history, and the universe history. So, sit back. We'll have a late afternoon snack. A nice catered meal will be brought in around 6. And if we're still up right around bedtime, there will be a bedtime snack provided later in the night. So hang in there, okay? So just north of us, about 12.2 billion years ago, so be aware, I'm going to start at 12.2 billion years ago and work our way up. There was a small explosion, or some locals might have called it a Big Bang. Big Bang. The light from that high energy explosion only recently reached the Earth, which I found kind of amazing. Not really, but a billion is a long time. So our solar system is thought to be about 4.5 billion years old, and humans have existed only a few million years. That started what we now call Jefferson, Iowa. So now you know the whole story. I'm not here to debate how we got here, but I just report the facts found on the internet, which we all know is factual. So, it was a cold and blustery day 4 billion years ago. North America was not formed. It wasn't just the way cake is made from batter. Just various parts of the world moved around. You've seen these things where at one time we were underwater, and one time we were part of Australia, and one time moving around, so it came back to what we kind of have today. So the glaciers started, and this little I don't have it. The little blue arrow pointing there, that's Greene County. So we were part of this glacier that came down. And you know what glaciers did? They weigh a little bit, and they either flattened out the ground or made valleys. They made well, I don't know exactly what they made initially, but they were part of this glacier thing that smoothed out Iowa. So a description of Iowa, a lot of people say is flat. I refer back to the Ragbri writers that started out this morning. You know, the northern routes are usually fairly flat. I think I saw where the elevation gain over the week was going to be, I can't remember now, 1,400 feet or something like that. If you go to southern Iowa, Chuck can verify this, sometimes you're up and down the whole day and it's a rough ride. So Iowa's not flat. If you go to Guthrie County, you know, it's hilly down there. And if you go down to Des Moines River, going down that valley and back up, so it's not totally flat. So people around that talk about the flyover state, us, it's not totally flat. So it's estimated at one time 80% of the state was once covered by prairie, the largest percentage in the nation. Today, less than 1/10 of 1% of Iowa's native prairie remains. And I think I don't know if there's anything around here. I know up by Manson there's a prairie that is still like 2 acres has never been turned. So that's, plus, a kick in for Thomas Jefferson Gardens, our north is called our Prairie Garden. And when we planted it 10 years ago, we haven't really touched it since then. We don't weed it. I shouldn't say weed anymore, I'm not on that board anymore. We don't weed it, we don't do anything to it, just let it grow. And so that's kind of what the Iowa prairie looked like hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And here's what it kind of looks like today if you found something. So again, Jefferson history, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Native Americans just a little bit. So the Native Americans arrived about 13,000 years ago. And by the time the European explorers and traders visited Iowa, the Native Americans were largely farmers with their social structure, the political structures that we know that they're like today. So the Indians were here first. I'm sorry if I'm not socially correct with Indians, but so they were in Greene County in about 1200, year 1200. And the most recent Indian tribes located in Greene County were the Sac and Meskwaki. I'm sure many of you people are familiar with Meskwaki people, with Meskwaki Indians, or have some good friends in Tama as you walk into the casino doors and give the Indians some money over there. So the Horseshoe Bend, an area north central in Greene County where the Raccoon River flows north and then circles back, was a favorite hunting ground of the Indians. And I must say, when I give tours here, when I always give tours, I always say that 99.9% of everything in this museum is some way related to Greene County. So then we go back where we have an Indian artifact display, and we have tusks from mastodons and things like that. And those things, all those things, many of them were found along the Raccoon River. So yes, there's a lot of things going on in Greene County and by Jefferson. So during the 18th and 19th centuries, Iowa was part of the French Louisiana, Spanish Louisiana. Iowa is when Iowa was formed, is the most extensive and total area, so we're right in the middle basically, and 31st most populous in the 50 states. So we are kind of right in the middle of everything. Louisiana Purchase was acquisition of the territory of Louisiana by the United States in 1803. In return for $15 million, or approximately $18 per square mile, not an acre, not a lot, per square mile, the United States bought it off France. And it was a long-term goal of President Thomas Jefferson. I don't think I have this here, but when they bought the land, it was with the deal that they would make the Indians Native Americans still owned much of the land. So when they bought it, it was in the deal kind of that they would have to make additional deals with the Native Americans to buy their land. When they bought it, it really wasn't all of the United States. They still had to make some deals with the Indians. And if you look through history, you kind of know how that went. Not real good for the Native Americans. So here's a map of Louisiana Purchase. Stretches all the way from Louisiana, all the way up into Canada, which includes Iowa and a bunch of other things. Mississippi River's pretty much the boundary. Okay, so now we're going to turn back to more towards Greene County. Truman Davis. How many people have been out to see the Truman Davis grave? Yeah, good. Excellent. I went out there one day. I've only been out there a couple times. If I remember correctly, the grave is on top of a hill, kind of. There's just a little gate you have to climb over the fence. But I remember one day I was there and I looked up and it's kind of surrounded with a little fence around the grave, but also around the fence was a herd of cattle. So I didn't go up that day. So it's a pasture, but it's out there. And there's a sign that oops, the next one shows a sign. I'm going to read about Truman. So Truman came here in 1849. He came by way of New York and through Adel. And what I want to tell you is that he brought with him 1 yoke of oxen, 1 cow, 1 horse, 12 chickens, 8 sheep, 2 pigs, 1 dog, and 6 children, along with his wife Mary. He and his sons built a log cabin on a hill just south of what is today Squirrel Hollow Park. The cabin was 7 feet high, 16 feet long, and 12 feet wide. All 8 humans, plus some animals, stayed in that cabin the first winter. And of course, they didn't have an inside bathroom, of course. They didn't have inside anything. So Truman Davis, his grave and marker on the original site, he's buried there, and his wife is buried in Grand Junction. Has anybody been to know where that grave? I'm sorry to say I've never been there. Has anybody been to her grave in Grand Junction? No? So here's what the marker looks like on the burial site. And it looks like there's a little bit of an opening that you can squeeze through there and go to the top of the hill. Just a kick for the historical society. I think we have about 20 sites around the county, maybe a little more, that have these kind of signs, these kind of cement markers around a bunch of historical sites around the county. They were put up by James Andrews Sr. years ago. Get ready, here's the shocker. Here's what Truman and his wife looked like. Oh, I didn't mean to say it. It was a rough time in that cabin back in 1849. So that's what they looked like back then. 1849. So I've kind of got marked some dates as we go along here. So in 1846, Iowa becomes a state. Remember, our date is 1872. That's what our 150 is built on. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So in 1846, Iowa becomes a state. Greene County was named for General Nathaniel Greene of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War. And many historians rank him as second only to George Washington as a military leader. And everything I've kind of read, I think that's probably true. And you wouldn't believe how many Greene counties there are in the United States. There's like 17 or more, because every time you look up something, you have to really type in Greene County, Iowa, or you get North Carolina and Georgia and all kinds of stuff. Surveying the county happened during this time, including the townships and sections that was completed, and early land purchases could be made from the government for $1.25 an acre. So they had to name the town, and so the site was selected by commissioners back in 1854, named after Thomas Jefferson, President Thomas Jefferson. And there's already a Jefferson in Dubuque County by that name. So we had to call ours New Jefferson. But Jefferson and Dubuque County kind of fell by the wayside and didn't make it. So about 30 years later, the post office decided we could be called Jefferson, so the name New Jefferson was dropped and we became just Jefferson. And $200 paid for the ground from the town that it was initially laid out on, and it was laid out on high ground between the Raccoon River and Hardin Creek. When I read this, I thought high ground. I'm not too sure. Obviously, if you go down to the Raccoon River, it's probably higher there. I wouldn't consider this high ground. I don't know. Stagecoach line. I haven't got too much on this other than it ran from southeast to northwest right through the county, and it went right through Jefferson. It went right through Pleasant Hill Church, and if you go out there, there's still stagecoach track wheel lines that you can see, and we have a mark out there indicating where those are at. And just northwest of town, it kind of followed the river a little bit, but just northwest of town, it split off, and one of the lines went to Okoboji, to Spirit Lake, and one went to Sioux City. So we had a stagecoach line back then. So in 1854, Greene County was formally organized with a population of 150. So this is still almost 20 years before Jefferson really became a town. And that was only because we were incorporated. I'll get to that later, but Jefferson was here before that, but not incorporated until 1872. The first courthouse was a log cabin of Judge William Phillips, about 4 miles southeast of Jefferson, out by Squirrel Hollow. There's kind of there'll be a picture of it here pretty soon, a little miniature cabin, a replica. During the winter of 56-57, several families living in Grant, Washington Township organized a school at Old Rippey. And Old Rippey is side of it is southwest of New Rippey. Is that about right, or south? So this was the location, kind of the first school in Greene County. Again, I'm kind of spreading out to Greene County, only because I think it's important for the history of Jefferson. The first coal mine was opened in Greene County in this time. And here's one that Mary Weaver had just given a program on very recently about the Eagle Mineral Springs. I don't know if any of you heard that, talking about the springs. And as I read through this, they talked about some of the claims that it was good for medicinal and chemical uses, but it was especially good for cleaning car radiators. I thought, I'm not putting any of that down my throat. Although maybe, I don't know. First printing press in 1859, first printing press was brought to Jefferson, and the paper was developed. The Jefferson Star published the Greene County tax list for several years. I don't know if that was, Rick's not here, I don't know if that's one of the original Jefferson papers that has trailed the genealogical line all the way up to present day or not. I know a lot of them are. I don't know if that's the very first one or not. So in 1866 to 69, we're getting closer to Jefferson's dates. First private bank was opened, and the bank was named Mickle and Head. Head was a kind of a high roller in those days back here. The following year, in 67, the railroad first came to town from Cedar Rapids. It's called the Cedar Rapids, Missouri River Railroad. Now it's called the Union Pacific. And it built the first tracks across the county. That year, the first regular train service reached Scranton. The Chicago Northwest Railroad was the first railroad to reach Council Bluffs in January 22nd, 1867. In 1869, the organization of the Greene County Egg Society was established, which was the beginning of the Greene County Fair. So that's been going on a long time too, over 150 years. I'm not too sure if the fairground's always been out there or not. I know the airport, I'll talk about that maybe a little later. The airport was out where, like where the casino is, out in that area. I don't know about the fairgrounds, if it's always been out east of town or not. So in 1860, 69, there was a temporary observatory built. Does anybody know what an observatory would be built for in Jefferson, Iowa?
It was for the solar eclipse.
That's right. Solar eclipse happened on August 7th, 1869, and because Jefferson was chosen as the prime viewing location around the world, really, world-famous scientists came here to the event. And here's another important thing. In 1871, Jefferson's first cigar factory was built. So here's a picture of that observatory. It was in 1869. So at the time when the scientists came here too, when they were observing this, they made a prediction, because we sat up on the hill and were by the river and stuff, that Jefferson would never have a cyclone or a tornado. Never a direct hit, but I don't think we've ever had a direct hit, but we've had some real recently very close around town, around the area. Just too bad, so that's not true. So, Jefferson was incorporated in 1872, 150 years ago. So how long is 150 years? Let's put 150 years in perspective. So I've lived in Jefferson, just think about 150 years. That sounds like a long, long time to me. So I've lived in Jefferson 44 years. So I've been part of Jefferson history for 30% of that time. Now that sounds like a big percentage. 150 sounds like a long time, but 30% sounds like fairly close. So Maryland, although I have up here 90, sorry, I should change that right now. Maybe I can. Oh, no, I can't. I kind of guessed at the 90. She'll be 95 next month or next week. So she's been here for 63% of the Jefferson history. That's a long time. I'm sorry, that's a long time. That's a lot. That's a high percentage. 63%. So think of yourself, how long you've been. I know there's some Jefferson long-termers in here, some lifelong residents. Some of us have moved in. Think of how long you've been here as a part of the history, and what things have happened, how the town has changed, what you've seen. So in 1872, when Jefferson became an official town, here's a job distribution from Iowa and the U.S. So this is what people did back in 1872 for jobs. So farmers and planters was the #1 job in Iowa, #1 job in the USA. Remember, 1872. You can look down, ag laborers 2, laborers 3, domestic servants 4. And as we kind of go down until like #6, we ranked the same as the US at this time. So the US at this time was kind of an agricultural, rural country. Employees of the railroad, we were 6th and the national was 9th. Teachers, 7th and 12th in national. Blacksmiths were 8th. Clerks in stores, horse people, milliners. Of course, I tell the story, a display back here of a milliner of a hat display. At one time we had 4 hat makers in town in Jefferson. I don't know if you could find a hat maker in Iowa now. So that was something that went. Masons and bricklayers, boot and shoemakers again. I don't know where we'd have to go to find a shoemaker, let alone a shoe repair. Traders and dealers and groceries and things like that. So there's what people in Iowa were doing. Well, obviously, we were an ag-based state back then, and we still are. I probably should have looked up what percentage was working in agriculture now. So in 1880, Jefferson's population, is that right, or is that Greene County? Jefferson population was 12,000? I think it too. There's my first mistake, I'm sorry. So that'd be Greene County was 12,700. I think we've talked about how the population's gone down. In fact, I think 100 years ago it was about as high as it ever was in Jefferson. But in 1889, the waterworks was built. This was followed by the first telephone being installed in Jefferson in 1891. Electric utility plant was formed in 1894. The railroad started excavating gravel to widen the grade for double tracks, and 300 to 400 men were employed in this operation, and the pit dug soon became Spring Lake. Is that? I wonder if that's not a spring-fed lake then. It's just been dug and what dumps into it? I know there's a little stream that comes in from the west, but that can't be. There is springs when they hit. Okay, here's a replica of the first courthouse. Obviously, just somebody put up a timber structure just to take care of business. So they probably land deeds and things like that, maybe to try some guy that was drunk at the tavern the night before. I have no idea.
And that's about 2 feet by 4 feet.
This structure is here. Yeah. And I really have no idea how big the real one was. So that's the first. It only lasted a couple years. So here's the second courthouse that was built on the square, right in the middle of the square, right where our one is now. It was built in 1870. And the courthouse just had their 100th. Is that right? Well, their 100th because it's the new courthouse. Sorry. So here's building the new courthouse in 1917. And you can see the old courthouse is to the right. And I love to tell the story, and I think it's true, I'm sticking with it, that they put the old courthouse on timbers and rolled it to the west and continued to use it until they got the new one built. You remember that, Marilyn? Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. And then I think, after that, this structure, was bought and moved to North Wilson and used as a stable, as a livery. That's an awful big building to move that far. I don't know if that's, I'm making that up. You never heard that? I'm making that up then. I'll tell you when I make stuff up. I think it was quite interesting that they rolled it over and used it until the new one was built in 1917. So if you've ever been in the courthouse, there's paintings clear up in the rotunda on the four sides. The painter was William Pico, a contemporary of Grant Wood. He painted the four murals where they are. I mean, they weren't painted on canvases and brought in. He painted them right there with scaffolding and things. Chris might know something about this. Peoples is not, Mike's not here. He painted the four murals. That's where the Combine was painted over a mural that depicted Indians hunting buffalo because it had water damage. The top of it leaked one time and it damaged that one and it damaged another mural too, and so they were repainted. They were repainted by a man named John Beardsley in 1962. Now, some of you might remember that. Marilyn, you remember? 1962, those two murals were repainted. He was a resident of Jefferson just for 1 year, this John Beardsley, and he was an abstract painter. So he wasn't a real life type painter. He was an abstract, but he was a guy in town that could paint, so they hired him to do it. So he painted. Yankee Robinson. Now I'm always kind of liking the story of Yankee Robinson. Does everybody know who Yankee Robinson was? I'm going to cover it here, but Yankee Robinson, I'm just going to, as you read too, I'm just going to read. He was born in New York. He was a shoemaker. Then he moved to Chicago and owned a minstrel show. In the fall of 1846, he joined a circus. And it was this time that John Brown, he had a circus and he went south. And it was at this time that John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry occurred. Having the name Yankee Robinson on the side of his wagons, he feared for his life. And so he left immediately and fled the town, leaving behind all of his wagons, horses, props, and equipment. So he skedaddled out of town and he never got that stuff back. So he moved to New York, opened the Yankee Robinson shows. In the 1870s, Al Ringling, one of the famous Ringling Brothers, worked for Yankee in his shows. The Ringling Brothers combined with the Yankee Robinson show in the 1880s. The Ringling Brothers said that Yankee Robinson was the man who taught them how to run a circus. In 1884, all of Yankee Robinson's circus equipment was sold to the Ringling Brothers Circus. I don't think Ringling Brothers ever came to Jefferson, but did small circuses make their rounds coming through Jefferson once in a while? Anybody remember that? No?
There was one in, I think in the East.
Yeah. I'm even thinking in Rockwell City we had a circus come through once in a while. Much, much smaller. Okay, so the final of this is that Yankee Robinson was in Bagley with a show, and when they were taking the train from Bagley to Laurelville, they came through Jefferson, and he was deathly sick, and so the conductor didn't think he was going to make it all the way to Laurelville, just put him off the train, just set him on the depot. And so he didn't have any ID with him, he didn't have anything, all he had was a Masonic pin on his collar. And so the Masonic Lodge people were called, they took him to the hotel, the Jefferson Hotel on Wilson, and they took care of him, they paid for his room and everything, but he died almost the next day. So they had a burial service for him, they took him out to the cemetery east of town, and this is what his looks like. It's about halfway down, about in the middle. I know it's got, you'll know it because it's got pictures of elephants on it and a bunch of other circus stuff on it. So it's quite the thing. And here's what Yankee looks like. Yankee Robinson. So now we're up to 1900. We're into the 150. 1901 was the year that the rural free delivery postal service started with 5 routes out of Jefferson. Anybody know how many routes we have today? I have no idea. I'm guessing we have about 5. I don't know. The Greene County Country Club was organized in 1903. Andrew Carnegie made a $10,000 gift for the Jefferson Public Library in 1904. Jefferson City Council passed an ordinance establishing an 8-mile-per-hour maximum speed limit for automobiles in the city. Remember, the Lincoln Highway wasn't here yet. 8 miles an hour, that's faster than I can walk, but not faster than my wife can walk. The first gasoline station was built in Jefferson in 1912, and the Lincoln Highway mud dirt road was completed in 1913. Again, Willard Zeller, Franklin Township, took a seed corn exhibit from here, and we have a sign out at his seed corn thing southwest of town. So he took this out to San Francisco for the Horn of Plenty display at the fair at the San Francisco Exposition, and he won prizes. And when it came back, the floor of the new courthouse was, you've seen all that, you walk on the mosaic, and we don't know who did that. Chuck's been trying to find that out for years. We don't know who the artist was that did the mosaic on the floor of that. And in 1918, the dedication of the bronze statue of Abraham Lincoln was given, and it was given by E.B. Wilson, and which is now, everybody's seen that, but this is the day of the display. Here's the library. The West Wing, the newer wing, was put on in 1967. But in 1904, the $10,000 gift was given from Carnegie to build libraries. Between 1886 and 1919, Carnegie donated more than $40 million for 1,679 new library buildings. $1 in 1919 is worth about $17 today. So that'd be about, he gave away $685 million for libraries. That's a lot of libraries. That's a lot of money. You should recognize this building. It's been in the news recently. This is Centennial Building, the first bank in town. It was lowered, as you can see, we've talked about this many times. The yellow part was cut off I'm thinking in the 60s, early 60s, and the building was dropped down to street level kind of, so there's no steps on it anymore. Again, there's a bank upstairs. There was offices. I don't know if there's a lawyer's office. And Chris, maybe get this right, did Durham Electric kind of start in the basement of this building? Is that right? Do you remember?
We were there at one time, yeah.
Yeah, didn't start there, but you were there at one time.
We started, somebody grew out.
Yeah. So, underneath this building, and if you look down to the north, to the left here, there's the Hotel Jefferson, which burned down in somebody's lifetime. I bet somebody remembers that, burning down. Yeah. Okay, so now it's the Centennial Building is our new restaurant, tea room, that just opened about a month ago. What's it called?
The Centennial.
It's called the Centennial. So it just opened, so that's good news. Good news. So here's the Lincoln Highway. We'll talk a little bit about the Lincoln Highway. The idea for the Lincoln Highway, Highway 30, the street right here, and this is the original path, was conceived by a group in 1913 by a group of automobile enthusiasts. As you might guess, rich guys that built cars. First name was supposed to be the Coast to Coast Rock Highway, but then they decided it would be better to honor Abraham Lincoln, so they called it the Lincoln Highway. It was the idea that the communities along the route would provide the building equipment in return for free materials to build and the right to be on the road, because there was a lot of controversy about where the actual route was going to go. People were giving them money, typical government, I shouldn't say typical government, that they were trying to buy the rights to have the path go through the route, go through their town. Not too sure how we got it, but we did. And the route was kept a secret for a long time because the people that were doing it wanted the whole United States to support the route that went from coast to coast. And they didn't want the route to get out, so people like in Texas or Montana wouldn't support it anymore. What are you holding me up? So the route starts in Times Square, New York City, at 42nd and Broadway, and ends in Lincoln Park in San Francisco. So in 1925, many of the roads names were like Lincoln Highway, but Congress passed a law in that year that roads needed to have numbers, so that's when we became Highway 30. So here's the path of the Lincoln Highway. You can see there's a loop. There's a couple loops that happened. One went down to Denver because they really wanted it there, and then it was eliminated. There's basically four routes that happen across here. This is number one. And when I went from here to San Francisco a couple years ago, a lot of times I tried to take the oldest route that I could find, but a lot of times off to my left, a couple hundred feet there, you could see a dirt path, and I think, pretty sure that was the original route, usually. And out in Wyoming, Interstate 80 is laid on top of Lincoln Highway as you go across there. So it was a dirt road to begin with, and so a lot of the farmers at that time made a lot of money because people get stuck, so they go out with their horses and pull cars out of the mud. So that made some extra money. And so in 1915, Jefferson's Main Street was renamed Lincoln Way. It's kind of the way it looks today. And this is the way it looked in the 1930s, looking east towards Grand Junction. Maybe you can't see it, but there's a sign that says drugs. Can you see? No, I can't see that. So to the right is the P&E restaurant, and a couple down is the Lincoln Hotel. Okay, and here's what it looks like from the top of the bell tower a few years back, looking towards Grand Junction. Here's Buddy. Buddy is a dog that led in January 1936, there was a terrible snowstorm, and Buddy took about 200 pounds of food and supplies to 17 stranded miners and 17 stranded truck drivers down along the Raccoon River, down near the coal mines, because they couldn't get out. They couldn't get food in, they couldn't get anything in. So Buddy and a few more dogs mushed down there and supposedly saved lives of all these people. And there's a plaque like that out by the park too. Here's a picture of the first gas station. We don't know exactly where it's at. So what I'm going to say about this is, in about 1938, there were 11 gas stations on Lincoln Highway between the city limits. I think our city limits are probably only about 2 miles long. So within 2 miles on the highway, I'm not talking about if they were 2 blocks off, but on the highway there was 11 gas stations. This was one, that was one, or there was one, Thomas Jefferson was one at the time. So there was a lot of gas stations. So this is the gas station down here, a couple blocks. It's kind of been rejuvenated. This is the way it looked back in that era. And I'm always having some people say that they had a dad that worked there or something like that. Okay, so in 20 to 30, the paving of Lincoln Highway took place across Greene County. All the bridges were made of concrete. And at the time, Greene County was the first county in the state to have a Lincoln Highway paved all the way across. Jefferson Golf Course was built. One of the Jefferson businesses was the Thermal Grade Company. The hot water heater, electric hot water heaters, employed 37 men in 1927. And we have one of those out of the fairground. It's a huge thing, and I remember somebody's told me that was familiar with it, that the company went out of business because they never broke down. The water heaters lasted forever, and so they couldn't sell them anymore.
I think Jeanette Henning still has one.
Is that right? And still uses it, you
We
mean?
had one in our basement on the brown farm south of Scranton too.
They were huge. I mean, the one we have out there is huge.
But they worked.
Yeah, yeah. So during this area, the city hall was built in 1929, and the lighting and installing of artificial lights in the athletic field happened in 1930. Here's a picture taken from across the street, this way. This is the first Jefferson police car. I'm not too sure about the year. I mean, it looks like a late 30s car. I've been told, but I don't remember. So this is the building you're sitting in, and behind it, as you notice, there's no walls. And I'm sure I've told you guys this before, but the cars would drive in, park right here, and get their gas, and drive back out again. So this was covered, but there's no walls.
It says 1941 Chevy back here.
Thank you, my assistant. 1941 Chevy. Thank you. Country schools. The first school in Jefferson opened in 1857 by Azra Mills. It was in the, I think in the courthouse. And I didn't put this down, but I think in the wintertime it was called the Music Academy. I'm not too sure. They taught music in the wintertime, but not in the rest of the year. I don't know what. And in 1861, Ezra formed a 30-man boy military unit and departed to fight in the Civil War. So in 1877, there were 141 country schoolhouses, 5,159 students, and teachers' monthly salaries were $29, although women were paid less. And women, if they got married, couldn't teach anymore. I believe that was right. So location schoolhouses were designed so no student had to walk more than 2 miles to school. The last country schoolhouses closed in 1954. I bet there's some people in here that went to country schoolhouses. This is our schoolhouse out at the fairgrounds. This is Bristol number 7, built in 1874. It's called the Minahan Schoolhouse. It's located out that way a couple miles. Now it's in here, and we have that open once in a while. People, I think, will recognize this. The big school. Okay, I will verify that I'm not making this up, that when they decided, when the school board back in whatever year decided they needed to paint the schoolhouse, the janitor, the custodian went uptown and says, we need to paint, what have you got for colors? And the guy says, I have some pink paint that was returned that never was accepted, I'll sell it to you on the cheap. And the janitor says, we'll take it. So that's how the pink schoolhouse became pink. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I also know that's a true story because about a month ago, somebody was in here that was related to that janitor, and she told me the same exact story. So I think it's true.
Our kids always called it the pink penitentiary.
Pink penitentiary. And that was the original brick schoolhouse in town. It looks a little different. But at one time, all K-12 was in that. And if you don't know, that's located where Hy-Vee is now, on that block. Took up the whole block. So in 37, there's several large additions. The post office building, the swimming pool, and the airport were constructed. I'm not going to go with... The hospital was built in 38, just west of town, and over the years, as you know, it's expanded. It was a 32-bed unit to begin with. It took 17 years of working and planning before it was built. And in 2014, it seems like it was sooner than that they expanded to make it much bigger than it is. Here was a mural in the post office. It was done during the New Deal mural called New Calf. The artist was Tom Savage. He did it in 1938, and he did several other murals in post office around. Here's a picture of the first hospital, and I know it's unbelievable how small this looks compared to what it looks like now. If you get an aerial shot of what it looks like now, this is just a blimp in the whole thing. This is Dr. Grimmel. This is Dr. Gus Grimmel, and she followed her brother and her dad to become a doctor in Jefferson. And back then, there weren't many female doctors, but she was one of the first ones in the state, and she worked out of Jefferson. Thus, Grimmel Street. Here's an aerial shot of Jefferson in 1937. Of course, there's no bell tower. I don't know if you've kind of looked, there's no bell tower. You can see the post office in the lower left, but there's a building where the parking lot is now. There's a building there. In the lower right, where's Joyce? In the lower right, there's the cabins. What were the name of the cabins back then? Is that where they were?
Oh, Green Gable.
Green Gable cabins, I think, were in that area where the Farm Bureau, someplace in that area where the Farm Bureau building is. There's churches, if you look real close, and that picture's back over there if you ever really want to look at it. Stores around the square, there's theaters. I think there's 4 theaters around the square. There's candy shop. People remember going into Louis, I think. There's bakeries, there's groceries. Back then, I'm not too sure how many grocery or pool halls there were, but I always get stories about pool halls and then basements and first floor, all kinds of stuff. And I always thought the Potter Drug, Woodruff Drug, Hy-Vee Drug was always a drugstore, but I was told initially it was just a dry goods store, just a general store. But it still sits on that corner. It still kind of looks like that building. Train wreck, we ride on the bike trail now about a mile and a half out of town. There's a marker where the train wreck occurred. I think it was in 1918. Fog slowed down one train and the other train sped up and they hit on and killed the engineer. Trains were a very important part of Jefferson. You know, 2 tracks that came through. There's a southbound. So this is looking north, so the original depot is there on the left. There's horses tied to a cart there. And now we have a cement elevator, but there's a wooden elevator sits there now. Here's the east-west, the Chicago Northwestern. The depot's gone, but that's the track, obviously, that we use today, where we have 30 or 40 coal car trains and everything else come through every day. 1966, the tower was built. Probably one of the things we're most noted for in Jefferson. So it goes up 128 feet to the observatory, 168 feet total. The total cost of the tower was approximately $350,000. It was dedicated in October '66. So Sue Richardson, I think you're here. Where are you at? Do you have a story about this? Are you the one that was at Dying Peoples that ran from the middle school and tried to go up the elevator first?
Well, I know they gave all the school children
Right,
Yes.
right. So, but you were there, like, around.
Yeah, I was Diane's age, so I don't remember running up there to try to be the first one out. But
Might have been
I
Diane,
didn't
too.
have height, so maybe.
So last year there was 6,100 visitors to the tower, so it's a pretty big draw. And side note, Larry Thompson is a great nephew of Dora Mahaney, and the only living relative. And so a few years ago they put, oh, I don't know if I have how many bells they put up now. But they added a whole other 2 octaves of bells. Is anybody here on the tower committee? So they added a lot of, they have 48 now, 48 bells. You know. And so the $350,000 that was used in '66 amounts to about $3 million today. And just last year, no, this year, 2022, they've had people from 45 states and 25 countries visit the bell tower. So, pretty big attraction for Jefferson. Talk just a little bit about military, which is a big thing about Jefferson. Again, this is basically Greene County. There's 900 Greene County men and women served in World War I, 45 died. In 1919, Eisenhower convoy traversed the Lincoln Highway from east to west, and they did it to see if they could use it as an emergency, as a war thing to transfer troops and equipment across the country. And they had like 209 men, 56 vehicles, and they lost several dozen vehicles. They ruined several dozen bridges, and the road was impassable. And obviously, when Eisenhower became president later on, he kind of was the driving force behind the interstate system around the country. So in World War II, there's 2,639 people died, or not died, served from Greene County, 73 died. In the Greene conflict, 173 men and women served, and 3 died, and 30 served in the Desert Storm, and 1 died. Back to the Mahaney Tower, here's the start of the tower. It was built by a company out of Chicago. There was 32 bells at the time, ranged from C to G.
We were from Sioux City.
The builders were from Sioux City?
Kleiner, named right up there, Kleiner Construction.
Oh, yeah. Or what I have. Oh, the bells. I'm sorry, did I say it was built? The bells were made by somebody in Chicago. Did I say that, or am I wrong again? That's twice. Doesn't matter. So the heaviest bell, the largest bell is the Middle Sea, and weighed 4,740 pounds. That's a lot of weight.
5,200 pounds.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Here's it going up. Look at the cars in front of the mid-60s cars, and some late 50s cars back over there. Now, I wonder if we have it. So when the railroad track was taken out, the north-south, it was turned into the Raccoon River Valley Trail, and it runs approximately 56 miles from Waukee to Jefferson. In 1997 is when it was extended from Yale to Jefferson. So in 13, a North Loop was built. So I think there's about 90 miles of paved trails that you could ride. Milwaukee train passenger service ended in 1952. The freight service continued until 1987. And a lot of the passenger trains went from Des Moines up through here, up to Okoboji and Spirit Lake. So a lot of people rode the train up to vacation at Spirit Lake. And then another little tidbit in addition, hundreds of Des Moines registered newspaper carriers would ride the train into the capital city for the annual Registered Carry Day parade, picnic and free-for-all at the Riverview Amusement Park. So there's the depot. Oops, there's the depot as it looks today. Here, how it looked about 3 or 4 years ago when a flood wiped out part of the track, part of the thing, and it took them several years to get it done. And here's how the trail looks early in the spring with all the flowers. Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna. My assistant's saying I need to hurry along.
It's just 3 o'clock, just letting you know.
Well, I've only been on for 45 minutes, so we're up. I'm okay, I think. Okay, here, I just threw this in this morning because here's a list that Rolf gave us of all the, he went around to each building on the square, each address, and tried to list all the stores that were in that address during the years. So pick out one that you kind of know. Well, look at the one I'm just picking out. This is East State Street, so that would be the north side of the thing. And I'm up there just looking at, well, doesn't matter which one I'm looking at. Well, look at the Centennial building now. Had an insurance, Admiral Store, Motor Day, the printer's box over there, Flower and Tea Garden there. So you can just go down and see how many stores were in. I don't know if you've seen the Skeeter's building that now has been bought. They took off the front about a month ago, and a Rexall drug sign appeared. And so here's Rexall drug. Was there for a while. So I just thought it was interesting to show it. Here's the Wilson, North Wilson.
Roger, where was Shoppy's Cafe?
Did you see it up here?
I did, I can't read it.
Was it on the last one?
Yeah. To the bottom.
Oh, 108, where Durham Clothing Bowyer, well, it's where Town and Country Realty is now, where Durham Clothing was at one time. That's the building. Shopping Cafe, I bet, that's a double building though.
It didn't used to
It did not used to be.
be. I mean, Durham was up and then was the east half and shopping was the west half.
Okay, thank you. Gamble store, well, where we used to be, and that little thing was Gamble store. Anybody got any recollections about any other? So we're the Jefferson State Bank, Square Deal Grocery, 114. Oh, it must have been a double. Okay, moving on. Okay, we're kind of now winding down. We're getting to more recent. So we had a program a year ago, or several years ago, about AMF, about Bill Sorensen coming in. And I always tell people, I think we've got some hidden, and I'll talk about a few of those, some hidden things here in town that people don't know. AMF, correct me if I'm wrong, supplies all the gymnastic equipment for all the Olympics and has for years. They supply all the NBA basketball backboards for the NBA, and they come from Jefferson, Iowa. I think that's amazing. Nobody knows that. I mean, I bet some of you didn't know that. I just think that's amazing. Powerlift supplies many colleges and professional things, weight rooms with all the equipment. It comes from Jefferson, Iowa. People from here go up and set it up someplace. I'm thinking of one more. Well, not Jefferson, but the Scranton Manufacturing, the garbage truck. They send garbage trucks all over the world. So we supply stuff that I think we should be really proud of. So initially we thought the first trampoline was built in the basement of C Hardware, over where Muir's is now. Should go back. But we were corrected and it was built in somebody's garage. And here's a picture of it. It was an inner tube covered with kind of a web thing. So that was the first, basically, trampoline was built in a garage. Aquatramp. So that's kind of an important, here's the outside of the building today. And it's changed hands. I mean, it's been bought out by different companies over the years. Does anybody here work there or had worked there?
When my family moved here, my dad got a job, and that's why we moved to Jefferson.
Yeah.
My dad got a job there.
Yeah. It's been here a long time, done a lot of things. Okay, 1956, the plowing matches and soil conservation field days were here at the Agorama, 150,000 people. What did I say, 56, 66. And I think it was held out kind of by the airport. Is that correct? Maybe on the north side of the road. The airport comes to mind, but something happened at the airport. Maybe people just parked there, I don't remember. 150,000 people came to that. This is a bad picture, but that's from what I can. So this is a picture of Robert Hoover, Roger Norgren, and Steve King. And the plow that you see here is one that they all used at one time in national championships.
Roger, Lawrence Huber on the left.
Yes. Oh, what?
Lawrence Huber on the left.
It's not Robert. Okay. The picture I had. Okay.
It may be Robert there in the picture, but Lawrence is the one who used it as a plow.
Okay, thank you.
He mentored Roger and Steve.
Huber did. Was Robert ever a plower?
No.
Oh, okay. Third mistake of the day. Okay. So in the 1990s, Captain Darrell Lindsay, who's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, his grave was in Europe, in Germany, where his plane went down, and it was brought back, and there's a monument up on the square now for him. And in 1998, the rec center was built, which seems like it was only about 10 years old, but that's 24 years ago. So it's impossible. If only I would go there, I would think. Since I only live about 100 feet from it, you'd think I'd go there more. Here's a picture of the rec center on the inside, which has been a big asset. Doreen Wilbur. I'm sure all of us kind of know about Doreen, but the most fascinating thing to me is, and I think this story's right, is that Skeeter was an auto mechanic and somebody couldn't pay their total bill or something, and so they gave Skeeter in payment a bow and some arrows. And so he took it home, and both of them started playing around with it, but Doreen really picked it up, and she started to shoot it, and Skeeter was the only coach she ever had, and she became, a national champion, a world champion, and an Olympic champion in 1972, and set world records. She was quite the asset to Jefferson and Greene County. And then they, along with other people in town, so they opened their house and their skills to kids around town, and that's still Don Orris and Phil Ziegler, I think, or Don Orris still does that, has kids in shooting seminars and stuff around town. So the tradition lives on. So here's a picture of Doreen in the day. Skeeter gave me this baseball, I call it a baseball trading card that she had for the Olympics. And then here's the statue that's uptown across the library. And
Roger?
Yes.
Not anything to do with Greene County necessarily, but when we moved to Marion 2 years ago, got to talking with our backyard neighbors, and he said how he used to be in archery competition. And I said, well, you ever heard of Doreen Wilbur? Oh, he knew Doreen and Skeeter well. They had met them at many competitions, and what a sweet lady she was. Yeah.
So I don't know if you know that the target that's across the street, diagonally across the street in the Home State Bank, that is the exact distance that she shot in the Olympics, across to that target. A couple other people, George Gallup, we all know about the Gallup House, we know about George Gallup polls. I didn't write this down, but the one thing I heard, somebody tell me if I'm wrong with this one, is that when he was at the University of Iowa, that his first poll was going around campus and making a list of all the good-looking co-eds on campus. Okay,
I had read that somewhere.
oh, I'm sticking to that story then. That's a good story. So that was his first poll that he did. The first Gallup poll was attractive co-eds on the University of Iowa campus. And the next was Lauren Shriver, who we all had heard of. The claim to fame, other than just being obviously an astronaut from Peyton, is that one of his mission that he was commander on deployed the Hubble telescope, which was used for years and years and years. It's still there, of course, but I think it's not used as much. Okay, any stories about either one of those guys that we need to know? Yeah.
We went to Rock Springs, Nebraska, where the Oregon Trail just comes into the state. There's a whole story there about a member of the crew who was the son of Wild Bill Hickok, and Wild Bill and McChandless, I think the name was. And there's big stuff about Lauren Shriver there in the museum in Rock Springs, Nebraska.
Which is out in the middle of it.
Well, South Nebraska, halfway out.
And why was it built there? Because of what?
Because McCandless was from there.
And that's where the Oregon Trail first entered into Nebraska.
Okay, well now we're kind of in the more recent things, Highway 4 overpass. So in 1935, an overpass was started to be talked about to go with the tracks. Because of the same reasons those things. It was emergency-wise, they couldn't get stuff across the tracks if something happened, and just less wrecks and things like that. So it was a long time. So in 35, there's about 50 trains a day that went to Jefferson. In 2012, there's about 80 trains a day. That's a lot of trains. So the overpasses opened up on November 12th in 2012. That's 10 years ago. That didn't seem possible either. Well, time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? So there's three, not typical, but there's 3 John Deere tractors were the first vehicles to go over the overpass. Which is one of the reasons they widened Highway 4 to get big tractors through town so they wouldn't block the whole thing. So the total cost of the overpass is $12 million. There's enough concrete in the span to pour sidewalk from Jefferson to Des Moines. Should make another bike path. Here's the overpass looking southeast. So here's just some things around town that I think are important to our history. Everybody, I'm sure, has seen these 2 murals. One is fairly new that the high school art classes have made, and they've done some around town. There's one in Ripley, I think. There's one in Junction. I just think the Jefferson one here that you can see from the bell tower, I think that's the best thing in town. And so the chicken one they just put up on the original hatchery building, and they repainted the front of the hatchery too. So I think that's really fun to have. I just think Sarah Stott has done a great job getting involved in the community with that. In fact, she's so involved when we ask her if she wants to do another one, she says she's booked ahead 2 or 3 years of people already telling her what they want. RVP, Robbie's building, has been voted the best tourism attraction in Iowa before. Sally's Alley is part of the alley renovation around town. Sally White was a secretary of Patron Inn, and when she retired, she got bored and started taking pictures out of her back window on the farm. And the pictures there are all taken out of her back window, and she has a book on it too. Thomas Jefferson Gardens, right next door, was initially started by Wallace T. Garden and Tom Poking, and carried off, and it's kind of a big draw. And there is the Highway 30 painted to scale from New York City to San Francisco. It's fun to watch kids on their bikes ride the trail back and forth. I think every foot is 12 miles or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Every foot is 12 miles. Here's our rooftop art. I think there's 6 or 7 up there now. We're going to do another one next spring. The one on the left is kind of one of the first ones we did, just quilt things, and the one on the right was done a couple years ago on top of this building right over here. So that's an ongoing thing, and they can be seen obviously from the top of the bell tower. Here's the new high school, which was opened in the fall of 2020. A great asset to our community. Here's the casino, which was opened in 15, which I'm not trying to stir the pot here, but all non-profit people gain a lot from the casino because we have grant money that comes through them, through the community foundation. And we paid for a roof, we paid for a ceiling, we paid for outside stuff just here at the museum. So we're eternally grateful for the community foundation and the casino. Here's Power Lift, and the inside of that with some of the equipment that they use. And before I end here, I want to make sure that if I've forgotten something, I think it's important, I'm really sorry, but there's a lot of things, and so You can tell me about him, but I'm pretty much done with this now. Last thing, just Landis, who's been several names over the years, but it's been a big part of it, of our ag community. And employs a lot of people and serves a lot of farmers around the area. So that's all I know about the last 12.2 billion years in Jefferson. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that our famous Roger Aegerter has been painting wonderful art on the backs of the buildings in the alley just half a block north of the square, and they are gorgeous. So good job.
Oh, thanks.
This may put you on the spot, but after all of your research on 12.2 billion years of Jefferson history, if you had to pick somebody that was the MVP, particularly of the last 150 years, who would you pick? Repeat.
Now, who would I pick as an MVP for the last 150 years? Talking about a person, probably. Are you talking about a person?
Yes.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. You know, there's a couple guys, just off the top of my head. Well, not even that. I can't even think of the guy's name, Head, who was a politician. He started the hotel, he did a bunch of stuff around town. E.B. Wilson put up the statue, and he was the first mayor, I think, of Jefferson. You know, I missed out. I could have, Noreen, you know, brought a lot of fame. There's a lot of people like that. Gallup, obviously, people around the world know Gallup. They don't know he's from Jefferson, but that name is associated with us. You know, I didn't even mention Bryce Pop, you know, who was, you know, was a big name and claimed, I know he's not Jefferson, but he's close enough. He married a Jefferson girl.
With his Scranton.
Yes, he's a Scranton kid, yes. Who are you thinking?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
During my dad, Carmichael's era with young businessmen, both Bill Hanson and Fred Lorraine were key people in Jefferson
Yes.
County.
Yeah, the Marines, all of the Marines are key people, you know, in different areas. You know, there's newspaper, history, whatever. They were key people. And they've been here forever. You know, they're true Jefferson people.
I think Ted Sorensen, who really became one of the people who built the first business that became a worldwide business.
Yeah.
I mean, Ted, I gotta get this right, because there's another guy.
Bill.
Named Bill.
Yeah. Maybe else have
Bill is the right guy, I think. Ted Sorensen was in the Kennedy administration.
Should we play that game where, and Ted Kennedy was a brother of it. Anybody else have a name or a situation that was important in the last 150 years? Yeah.
It doesn't have too much meaning, but you showed Shabbos Cafe, and that's where we ate the night we were engaged.
Very important, very important.
64 years ago.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay.
What about educators?
Well, Jen, who was your superintendent?
Well, my first one was Linduska.
Linduska.
Yeah.
So he was around for many years. The field's named after him. Bob Schmidt was around.
Jack Oates, possibly.
Jack Oates. You know, see them. Yeah, there's a nationally known name. His kids and him. You know, he supposedly is the jazz grandfather of Iowa, maybe more. So he was very important. You know, and, you know, we could go along with names and names. Yeah.
Well, I like Jefferson because I was born in the hospital here. How many were born here?
How many people were born in Jefferson? 2 or 3.
My husband Bob was supposedly the first one, fourth birth there.
First birthday. Huh. You were born in the back seat of a 57 Chevy. Yeah.
Your house was pretty good for 12 billion years.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. Again, thank you very much for coming. One more thing as director I'm going to say, to support the museum, we do it with grants, we do it with memberships, we do it with donations. So in the future, we do it with people leaving money in their wills for them. So don't forget that either. But to keep us going, along the run, we need money. Thank you.
Do you want to mention the new things that have been coming?
So in the back, we have a new player piano, it's an old, new, it's a new old player piano that we pumped, Mickey and I the other day pumped on this thing. It's not electric, so you have to pump it to get it to go. And I sat truly for less than a minute and I was pooped. Mickey sat down and kept it going a little bit longer, but it works. So we're going to try and bring that up here sometime and let people play it. Jackie Fye just yesterday sent me, if you want to see them, they're back in where Doreen stuff is, back over here. Sent me 2 glass display things of her Olympic stuff. And one is of her Olympic participation as a participant, and one is of her as a judge. There are 6 identification things that she had in the Olympics with her picture on it, with the Olympic name. I think those are outstanding. You know, we can almost put Jackie Fye's name in this important people. You know, she was the head of the Olympic gymnastics judging for many years. I mean, she was through some controversy, and she knew them. If they were an Olympic, she knew them. Anyway, that's back over there if you just want to take a peek at it. We just got it. What else? There's a spittoon back over here. It says all donations appreciated. Don't spit in it, put money. Okay, my assistant, if there's no?
No, I'm just going to say there's cookies and drinks.
More cookies and drink.
I think that this is really a nice museum to just come and stroll through. And I want you to know that there are lots of things for children to see. And Roger occasionally gets a call from a couple of grandmas that say, we got some kids that need to spend some time looking through some history, and he'll make an appointment and they can come up here and learn about Jefferson. And it's a good way to entertain kids. And also you learn something.
Well, I hope you didn't learn something today and had an okay time. It wasn't as long as I thought. 12.2 billion years doesn't take that long, does it? Thank you very much. Thank you.